It quickly escalated into a full-scale, treacherous situation. The thick, billowing smoke could be seen for miles around. The warehouse and a business next door were engulfed in flames, located on the northbound Jeffries Service Drive, just south of Warren Avenue. At this hour, the blaze is contained, but not under control as firefighters watch it burn. Tonight, as authorities investigate the cause of the fire, arson is suspected. We'll bring you a full report on this situation as it develops later this evening. A dangerous situation all day long for the firefighters. The walls of the old Motor City Wiping Cloth Company and an abandoned warehouse now owned by the city crashed down in a number of spots. In the early stages of the fire, a 24-year veteran firefighter died when he fell 3 stories, breaking his neck. The fire became progressively worse through the day, spreading to an adjacent paper warehouse, complicating the touchy situation. It was in this building that 2 more firefighters lost their lives, trapped when a wall collapsed on top of them. 2 medevac helicopters were called in, landing on I-96, which had been blocked off in the northbound direction. 2 firefighters were carried out of the smoke-filled building. EMS units worked frantically to save the men. But it soon became tragically apparent that the choppers weren't needed. Mayor Coleman Young arrived at the scene to survey the situation and expressed his anger that lives were lost.
One of the worst tragedies to ever befall the fire department in this city. And you see the firemen carrying on, I think, in the finest tradition of the force. It is a tragedy that men should have to lose their lives over an abandoned warehouse.
Wednesday, March 12th, 1987. Tonight, at least 3 brave firefighters are dead. The worst night in the fire department's history. As videographer John Cellino and myself were leaving the scene tonight, a state police trooper turned to me and said, "What a waste. It's a shame that brave men had to die for an old, vacant."
It devastated the building, turning it into a death trap. The Detroit Fire Department has been hit hard by a killer fire. Good evening. They were called to fight a fire. They then had to fight for their lives. An old warehouse near downtown Detroit became a death trap for 3 Detroit firefighters today. Its killer flames still burning at this hour. It started at about 3 o'clock this afternoon in an old 4-story warehouse, and it quickly escalated to 5 alarms, a major fire. The building, which last housed the Motor City Wiping Cloth Company, sits on the surface drive of the Jeffries Freeway at Hancock near the Ford Freeway. As debris and the interior structure burned, the shell of the building weakened and walls began tumbling down. 1 firefighter fell to his death in the early part of the fire. Lieutenant Paul Shimmick had served for 26 years. Then as darkness came, there came word of firefighters trapped beneath crumbling walls. 2 more firefighters died, identified as David Lau, a 31-year veteran, and Larry McDonald, a 2nd-generation firefighter. Several other firefighters have been injured. The old building still burns at this hour, and dozens of men keep struggling to kill the fire which killed their friends. It began 8 hours ago. It's not over yet. News 4's team coverage, which began this afternoon, is continuing. News 4's Ned McGrath has been at the scene since the early alarms were called in. He's there to bring us up to date on the tragic series of events. Ned?
Mort, this is a fire that just doesn't want to quit. I have been here for 8 hours. I have seen this fire go up. I have seen it go down. I have seen it go back up. Just within the past 15 minutes, there has been an explosion. Walls have collapsed. They have moved more equipment into the area as best they can. They are having some trouble bringing in the heavy equipment back there, and they are probably, at least we've been told, as best they can, let some of this building just burn itself out. Considering what has happened here today and tonight, they are not anxious to risk any more lives on this one. Detroit firefighters got the call shortly before 3 o'clock. Thick smoke in the area southeast of the junction of the Ford and Jeffries freeways. Before it went from bad to worse, firefighters worked their way to the top floor of the abandoned warehouse. But there was an explosion and only one way out.
It was 3 firemen trapped in that window and 1 fell, and 2 more were trapped and the firemen were trying to rescue them, and it took about 10 minutes. The fire was coming out. The fire was out of control. I don't know how they got trapped up there.
Another explosion. The men fell to the ground. Despite valiant efforts to revive them, 1 firefighter died. The 2 survivors were caught on their way down by electrical wires. By 5, they were still describing the fire as out of control. Whipped by winds, it had spread next door to engulf the Continental Paper Company. What's in there?
Garbage can liners, you name it, any kind of paper product you'd need, it's in there.
At 6, trouble at the Continental Warehouse. They're not sure if it was the roof or the floor that gave in, but 3 men were trapped. Listen closely as firefighters on the outside call to their colleagues on the inside.
Okay, you're on the guys, okay.
Burn units were put on notice, medical helicopters dispatched. Hard, almost impossible to see in all this thick black smoke. Right over the building right now, the medevac helicopter coming in to take the injured men away. Only one of them would get out alive. By 7:30, word had spread among the army of weary firefighters.
Worst day of my life here. 35 years on a job, I've never seen anything as bad as this.
That seems to be the consensus out here tonight. They've never seen anything quite like it. As I mentioned more just before we came on the air, that wall back there collapsed. I'm not sure if we can get a real good shot of it. It collapsed and came down on the service drive. Firefighters went charging by us here. They have brought in bulldozers and earth-moving equipment to clean up the rubble around here. But boy, it's going to be a long time before they get to that part of the operation out here.
Ned, that's got to be excruciatingly painful. These guys know about the deaths of their colleagues, and yet they still have to fight that fire. How are they taking it? How are they holding up?
Well, Mort, you know, because this thing has gone up and gone down so many times, it must have been maybe an hour or so ago. I saw some of the men over at the Salvation Army or Red Cross canteen truck over here. They look like they've been fighting a war, and really they have been for the last couple of hours. They do know that they lost some of their colleagues here. And boy, for this thing to start up again, I mean, one of the men as he was running by here a few minutes ago just shook his head. I can't believe it, he said.
Okay, Ned, thank you. Jennifer?
Detroit's mayor made it a point to go to the scene of the fire tonight. Coleman Young saw firsthand the difficulties firefighters faced. When he arrived, there was some confusion over the numbers of firefighters dead and injured. But what the mayor saw touched him deeply.
Already, it's very clearly, as I said, one of the worst tragedies to ever befall the fire department in this city. And you see the firemen carrying on, I think, in the finest tradition of the force. It is a tragedy that men should have to lose their lives over an abandoned warehouse.
The mayor chose not to speculate about the cause of the fire. The mayor said he understood the building was owned by the city, but his office tells News 4 Nightbeat it is not sure that is the case. One question remains unanswered tonight, and that is just how did this killer fire start? Was it accidental, or could it have been set intentionally? Our team coverage takes us to Detroit Fire Headquarters, where Rich Make updates us on the investigation into the cause of this fire. Rich?
Well, Jennifer, of course, it's going to be a very difficult time for the fire department. They have to decide exactly what occurred in that fire. And now it seems more and more this thing is pointing toward arson, that it may have been deliberately set. The Fire Marshal, Donald Robinson, is with me right now, who is in charge of the arson squad. Tell me about that situation, about where your investigation. You have people in custody.
Well, Rich, we are continuing our investigation, but we do have sufficient evidence now to classify that fire as an arson fire.
Do you expect, now you have people in custody right now?
Yes, we do have 2 suspects in custody at the present time.
You expect that they will be charged with arson in this case?
I'm not at liberty to make that statement now, but we will be talking to them throughout tonight.
Will there be other people that you'll be questioning besides these 2 that you have now?
We'll just be discussing the fire with those 2 gentlemen.
Okay, do we have any idea how it was started? Whether there was an accelerant used? To what extent do we have information on this at this point?
Well, I'm not at liberty to discuss that either, Rich.
All right, let me ask you something else about this fire. This is a question that came up earlier today about the timing of the fire being declared under control. There was some speculation that perhaps those firemen who were killed would not have died had that fire been left as an still out of control, declared out of control, that they would not have been in that area. In other words, did declaring the fire under control contribute to the death of any firemen tonight?
I think that's reckless speculation, and beyond that, I'm not at liberty to even discuss it.
You have no indication that that's true?
Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you, Donald Robinson, very much. Fire Marshal Donald Robinson indicating that we have an arson fire here and that we are essentially near charging somebody. We'll have to see where the investigation goes from here.
Rich, let's be clear. 2 people being questioned, no one charged as yet.
That's right, 2 being questioned, no one charged as yet, but it's definitely an arson fire. Sooner or later, somebody is going to be charged with it.
All right, thanks, Rich.
Thank you, Rich. The Detroit Fire Department has recorded many difficult days, but never a day as devastating as this one. News 4's team coverage focuses now on the firefighters who lost their lives today. Steve Gray is standing by in the newsroom with that dark side of this story. Steve?
More 3 very tragic stories tonight as Detroit firefighters have lost 2 veteran firemen and a 24-year-old rookie. Larry McDonald was in just the 4th month of his apprenticeship. His father was one of the department's fire engine operators. Also killed Lieutenant David Lau, a 31-year veteran, that is, assigned to Engine Company 26. And the first fireman to lose his life today, Lieutenant Paul Shimmick, a Detroit firefighter for 26 years. His men say it was just like Lieutenant Paul Shimmick to be in the thick of the fight, and that's exactly where he was when the 43-year-old father of 3 adult boys fell to his death. His fellow firefighters at Engine Company 10 say he was a no-nonsense professional.
His approach to firefighting was very deliberate. He believed in vacant dwellings, vacant buildings. Take your time. Don't get hurt.
You know, it's just a heck of a loss for this engine house and this department, and that's about all I can say because, you know, I've got to look over his shoes and probably take down his bed and everything, and he was one hell of a fireman. From what I understand, I didn't socialize him with that much, but he was one hell of a father, too.
Wonderful kids. Always had respect for older people, and they were brought up the right way, church people.
Mary and Richard Szymanski live next door to the Shimmicks. They say you couldn't ask for a better neighbor or father.
Great to his children. I mean, there's 2 of them in the service, and when they say they're a little homesick, he'll ride out to California and he'll spend some time with them.
Lieutenant Paul Shimmick is survived by his wife Karen, his sons David, Steve, and Matthew. Our sympathies to the families and friends of all the firefighters who lost their lives while unselfishly doing the job that we often take for granted. Mort?
I'm just thinking that father whose son followed him into his profession, then died in his apprenticeship. What a load that has to be to carry.
Thank you, Steve. The injured firefighters have been taken to Detroit Receiving Hospital. News 4's team coverage takes us there live. Nona Barbie is standing by with the latest. Nona?
Jennifer, it's been a heart-rending and tragic night here at Detroit Receiving. 8 firefighters were brought here during the night. As you know, 2 of those brought here to Detroit Receiving are dead, but 6 others are alive and apparently doing well. They were treated for varying degrees of smoke inhalation.
None of them are critically injured, I would at the moment. They didn't. None of them seem to be critical. 2 have gone upstairs already. 1 had a fracture in the elbow, and he's already been operated on, and he should be out of the operating room now, I would think.
1 unidentified firefighter who was trapped in the warehouse at the height of the blaze has been treated and released. 2 of his colleagues who were trapped with him did not make it. Doctors describe what happened.
Apparently they were on a 2nd floor of the building when the roof suddenly caved in above them, and the roof, then plunged through to the 1st floor, and they were trapped up to their waist in debris. And unfortunately, due to the weight of all the building materials, it took a fair amount of time before they can get the victims out.
Doctors here tell us that the 5 firemen who are being treated at Detroit Receiving should be released from the hospital within 2 to 3 days. Hospital officials still will not tell us the names of the injured firefighters, but they are doing well, as we understand it. Jennifer Moore?
Nona, as you said, a very long and difficult night for these people. Are friends and family and colleagues gathered at the hospital now?
They had come into the hospital through the evening. I checked moments before we went on the air. There was no one down in the emergency room. A few may be upstairs with their loved ones. Others, I understand, have gone home. But it was very difficult to watch these people waiting for word about whether their men and 1 woman firefighter, whether their relatives, their loved ones were okay.
You said a long and tough night.
Thank you, Nona. It took just a few fiery hours today to nearly match the toll in firefighters' lives in the past 13 years here in Detroit. 4 firefighters have died on duty since 1974. The last firefighter fatality was in October 1977. That was when Michael Johnson died fighting a house fire. Today's killer fire rang out 5 alarms. There were only 2 fires as large during all of last year. There are fires involving dangerous chemicals like the one in southwest Detroit last summer. Firefighters struggle to contain flames and prevent dangerous fumes from spreading. They take precautions, but they do put their lives on the line. 2 weeks ago, they struggled against the smoky 4-alarm blaze which consumed a school supply warehouse. There was danger there too. They put their lives on the line. They work to protect human lives and property today. 3 paid the ultimate price. Others will carry scars from this day for the rest of their lives, and they will continue to put their lives on the line.
Days after the killer warehouse fire, investigators appear to have few clues about who started the blaze. A source involved in the probe telling News 4 today that one man taken into custody for questioning is expected to be released soon, and the other, who's being held on an outstanding warrant, probably had nothing to do with the fire. As News 4's Paul Long reports, fire officials hope that increasing the arson reward will bring them new leads.
This morning, snow covered the rubble of Thursday's tragedy. The fire that burned for 38 hours smoldered and will for days to come.
They had an area on a window here, and they dropped the rope out of another window here.
Fire officials were again on the scene, reconstructing events, investigating how 3 men were killed, 10 injured, and the Continental Paper and Supply Company destroyed.
Every company in the area has always looked at this area, this building, and said one of these days we're going to get one. And they've pre-planned them, what we're going to do. Didn't look like much on arrival.
Arson, Lieutenant Peck.
The arson squad expects their investigation to be a long one, but leads are coming in, 4 good ones so far, and more expected, as the reward for information has now risen to $4,000 and may go even higher.
The reward can be a real key to our investigation, yes, because what it does is it attracts people attention, people that have some information, even people that have information about that building before the fire.
There had been complaints about the warehouse from neighbors and Continental Paper. Firefighters made numerous trips there to put out small fires. The city had slated it for demolition. Now questions and concerns are being raised again over the hundreds of other abandoned buildings in the city.
We have doubled our schedule for demolition. Right now, we have all the contractors available in Detroit and in this area working on demolition. So it was definitely not a case of neglect. We're going as fast as we possibly can. We spend as much money as we possibly can.
What's left now is for the debris to be cleared sometime later this week once it all cools down, the investigation to continue, and for the fire department to learn from this, as it does from any fire. However, as one fireman told me this morning, no matter how good the training, no matter how much you learn and how careful you are, eventually something like this is going to happen, and it will probably happen again. Paul Long, News 4, Detroit.
Detroit fire officials are asking anyone with information about the killer arson fire to call them. There are 2 hotlines, 1-800-44-ARSON. That number is open 24 hours a day. Or you can call the City of Detroit Arson Squad at 224-2040.
Continental Paper Company, whose main warehouse was destroyed when the big fire jumped an alley, was trying today to get back into business by Tuesday. The company's employees fled their building before the fire arrived, but managed to save essential records. Co-owner Mike Pisa says the losses hurt his business.
It's your life, and you lose part of your life. So we're very fortunate. I think that between the people that we have, they tried to get out as many particulars as they could. We'll do fine, but you know, it's rather devastating when you see something that you're building go down.
Pisa said firefighters had told him they could save his building, but the blaze got out of control when firemen turned their attention to saving 2 comrades trapped in debris. Pisa says they made the right decision. From
Stakes are high. The information is important. The reward has doubled tonight for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the arsonist who set the deadly warehouse fire on Detroit's west side last Thursday. Fire officials reported hazards at the abandoned building several times before the tragedy that they feared happened. 3 courageous men lost their lives in the battle zone. 11 other firefighters suffered injuries. The last 3 who were hospitalized are home tonight. and the fire that caused so much pain is finally out. But the investigation is far from over. Channel 7's Ken Ford reports.
It took until 4 this morning, 38 hours before firemen could at last say it's out. And even yet, a fire truck remains at the scene just in case. The first call came at 3:06 Thursday afternoon. Within half an hour, it had gone to 5 alarms. Today, arson investigators are looking for answers. 2 men are in custody, but more information is needed before this case can be wrapped up. Investigators are putting a lot of hope in a reward fund that's up to $4,000 and growing.
We expect or anticipate this reward to grow even larger as other agencies become aware of it. Right? And as they understand that we need this particular program in this particular fire. It's not that often that we have to rely on the reward system. But in a fire of this magnitude, with the severity of the fire as well as the deaths of the firefighters, we felt it was important to follow this particular system, and hopefully it'll attract the witnesses that we're looking for.
They began putting up these reward posters just yesterday, and almost immediately fire investigators say information started coming in. Some of those calls contain good and useful information. If you know something about this fire and you're interested in the reward, call 1-800-44-ARSON. In Detroit, I'm Ken Ford, Channel 7 Action News reporting.
Funeral services for Lieutenant David Law and Larry McDonald are scheduled for Monday. Arrangements for Lieutenant Paul Shimmick are still being made. A public memorial service for all 3 men is scheduled for 1 o'clock Monday afternoon at Cobo Hall.
And there's more on the warehouse fire story tonight. The main warehouse of the Continental Paper Company burned to the ground along with that abandoned building. And tomorrow, the company's 85 employees are planning to meet for a discussion about the future. The owner is vowing to forge ahead, and he's hoping to be back in business by Tuesday. Continental is working out of another building in Detroit and has rented still another facility in Dearborn temporarily. The president of the company tells Channel 7 News he warned the city about the dangers of the abandoned building, but nothing was done.
There have been other little fires like this. This one started off as innocently as any of the others. Smoke coming out of the windows. We felt that when the smoke was coming out, the fire would be put out in 20 minutes. No reason to really overreact. And unfortunately, it got out of control. I've never gone through anything like this. I hope no one else ever has to go through anything like this. It's completely devastating.
We should mention that the demolition of that building was planned by the city, but obviously it wasn't done in time. All the employees of the Continental Paper who were in the building at the time of the fire managed to get out.
What started as a trash fire call in an abandoned building near the Jeffries Freeway in Detroit ended up as a 5-alarm inferno, killing 3 firefighters. The blaze roared on for hours, and it turned out several firefighters were trapped inside, forcing a dangerous rescue. Good evening, everybody. It has been a rough afternoon and an evening for Detroit firefighters, a stubborn blaze, and the loss of co-workers.
Our Tiwa Chang brought us our first pictures of this fire more than 7 hours ago. Tiwa joins us now live just north of the fire site. How does it look now, Tiwa?
Kathy, this killer fire is still raging out of control. Take a look at it for yourself. If you go in there, you can see the smoke is still rising in plumes about 200 to 300 feet. And inside, the fire is still burning out of control. Now, it is not spreading, though. And the reason why it's burning out of control is because of what's inside, rags and paper and cleaning fluid. The smoke, as I said, is rising hundreds of feet, and the heat could be felt a block away at some points. Now, the fire is in 3 buildings, and apparently in 2 of them, Detroit firemen died. Just after 3, the fire began in an abandoned warehouse that was once the Motor City Wiping Cloth Company. When Engine Company 10 arrived first on the scene, Lieutenant Paul Shimmick and firemen Derek Rikowski and Bob English went to the 3rd floor, where a small fire suddenly flashed into an inferno. They were forced to jump for their lives, according to an eyewitness and fellow fireman.
This place is loaded with bundles of rags and they got inside and it suddenly took off on them. By the time they got back to the window, the whole 3rd floor was gone. Just by the time they got a ladder up to him.
So he had to jump?
He had to jump. And he landed right, he landed right next to the cars over there. Another guy hit one of the power lines and fell down. Another guy hit the ladder and went down. So it was about 4 guys that got hurt, I believe.
And then the lieutenant was killed.
Right.
Suddenly at 6:15, firemen from Engine 26 were trapped in the adjacent Continental Paper Company building. Firemen frantically worked to chop down the secure doors to get to the 3 men trapped on the first floor under the collapsed roof.
Hey, John, we're going to have some more help back there. You get any more companies? We got this fire raging, and we got these guys trapped.
Hey, we found one! Okay, they got one! Okay, the other guys, okay!
One fireman, Frank Dole, was found safe. He went after the other 2, apparently. Lieutenant David Law and Fireman McDonald. They were found buried up to their necks under 5 feet of rubble. It was too late for the 2. They were dead. Now, Fireman Frank Dole, if the accounts are correct, is a hero. He went in after his buddy after he saw the roof collapse to try and save them. Also, by 7:30, the firemen had to let that fire burn because they couldn't stop it. They just primarily tried to stop it from spreading. Now, the building the fire started in originally was purchased by the city 2 weeks ago, according to firemen, after being abandoned for 4 years. And the firemen claimed that it wasn't boarded up. We have not been able to confirm that. What we have been able to confirm is that the arson investigators believe it was definitely arson, and they have arrested 2 men, and they've turned them over to homicide. One of the men may have lived inside the building. That's the situation here. This killer fire is still burning out of control. Bruce and Kathy?
I'm sorry. T.Y., can you clarify for us, please? Are these suspects, or are they just being questioned at this hour?
Well, originally they were thought to be suspects, but as they're turned over to homicide, they're probably now considered suspects. It's happening even as we speak, Kathy.
Okay, T.Y., if we get anything new from down there, we'll come back to you at the scene of that fire in northwest Detroit. A real fire, a real blaze.
3 helicopters kept their engines stirring, ready to whisk trapped men to medical attention. There wasn't much they could do. The intense heat quickly crumbled the walls of the old warehouse. 47-year-old Paul Shimmick was the first to go, leaping 3 stories trying to escape the flames. The news came hard to friends he made in his 24 years in the department.
Well, if there was a job to do there, Paul Shimmick would be there doing it.
At all costs?
All the time. All the time. He was a fine man.
But Shimmick's death wasn't the last of the day. In the adjacent building, tons of rubble crushed firefighters David Lau and Larry McDonald Jr. The 19-year-old McDonald has a father who's also in the department, and today was his birthday.
There's no diminishing the tragedy of those people who lost their lives, but there were other victims as well. Just a few hours ago, that was a viable workplace.
The Continental Paper Company was a family-owned janitorial supply business that's been here for years.
You give me your keys, as soon as you got it cleaned up, I'll move them out.
Employees aren't sure when they'll be reclaiming their cars, if they survived, and the son of the owner felt a premonition about
3 Detroit firemen killed, the worst fire department tragedy in 70 years in this city. How did it happen? Well, Fire Lieutenant Paul Shimmick was killed when he was blown out of a 3rd-story window on the old warehouse that was on fire. He died of severe head injuries and a broken neck. Shimmick was killed about 3:15 yesterday afternoon, but there was more danger ahead, more to come. Veteran firemen on the scene call it the worst fire they've ever seen, and it was. It then spread to the next building, the Continental Paper Company. The firemen were ordered in, but the roof then collapsed. 2 of the firefighters, 20-year-old Larry McDonald Jr. and Lieutenant David Lau, 48 years old, and a 32-year veteran of the force. They were buried under tons of bricks and debris. They were trapped, as one of their fellow men said, inside, buried up to their heads. He told us they didn't have a chance. And by the time their fellow firemen got to them, dug them out, they were gone. 3 hours after Lieutenant Shimmick was blown out of that 3rd-story window, the other 2 men died. More than 24 hours after it started, the fire at the Jeffries Service Drive at Hancock is still smoldering, still being hosed down by men of the fire department. An abandoned warehouse owned by the city of Detroit ruined. So is the nearby Continental Paper Company. 3 firefighters are still hospitalized, 8 others are home from the hospital, and 2 men taken into custody by arson investigators last night are still being questioned by police, who now say they have not been ruled out as suspects in the torching of the building. But arson investigators have told Channel 7 News this fire was not set by somebody trying to keep warm. It was meant to destroy the warehouse. Channel 7's coverage of new developments in the fire story begins with Channel 7's Chris Hansen, who is following the official investigation. Chris is standing by at the scene of the fire, and he joins us now with this live-action camera report. Chris?
Bill, as you can see over my shoulder, the fire is all but out, but a wrecking crew has been brought in to knock down the walls before they fall down. Ironically, the city of Detroit knew this warehouse could be a problem, and it was going to do something about it. On December 4th, City Council agreed that this building should be demolished. Bids were let out, and the lowest bid was $324,000. It went to Metro Wrecking. The wrecking was supposed to start in 7 to 10 days. So in other words, if there's no fire, this building would have been torn down anyhow. That is, except for yesterday's tragedy. The vacant warehouse had already been targeted by the Detroit Fire Department as a possible fire or arson spot. Channel 7 News has learned at least 5 pre-planned fire inspections have been conducted here in the past several months. Those inspections usually take place in vacant buildings identified as hazards. So if they catch fire, the fire department has a plan. Apparently, the old warehouse contained tightly wrapped bundles of rags, which are flammable and can sometimes explode. The fire marshal's office has not pinpointed a cause, but workers at the next-door Continental Supply Company say vagrants stayed in the warehouse and would sometimes light fires to keep warm.
But they was in and out every day, you know, grabbing all old rags and shirts and clothes, whatever they could get out of there. You know, salvage it. Yeah.
Was this kind of like, with that warehouse there, would you say that it was kind of like an accident waiting for a place to happen?
Yes, it sure was. It should have been boarded up.
The fire didn't take long to spread to the supply company, which contained more flammable materials, including paper products and solvents. Are you surprised this hadn't happened before?
Yeah, really I am, because, you know, the way people are, bums that were living in there. It's strange to me that it hadn't happened before.
Detroit police homicide investigators are still questioning this man who apparently stayed in the vacant building, and a second man taken into custody yesterday. No charges have been filed. 6 other people were also questioned today. Homicide detectives are working closely with arson investigators. Workers with the Metro Demolition Company started tearing down the charred walls about 3 o'clock this afternoon. Since the fire literally gutted the building, there was a danger of the walls collapsing. While there had been a number of fires in that building before, this one was obviously a different kind of fire, more serious and set in perhaps several locations, so it would be sure the entire building would be destroyed. In the meantime, arson and homicide investigators have been in the area putting up posters, wanting people to turn in information if they saw anything around the building about the time the fire started. If you have any information on anyone who may have started the fire, you can call the Arson Investigation Headquarters at 224-2040. That's 224-2040. Reporting live on the Near West Side, I'm Chris Hansen, Channel 7.
An old building that nobody is using, if it's owned by the city.
Well,
that's a tough one to figure out, isn't it?
It is a tough one to figure out, and that's maybe why arson investigators aren't saying too much at this point, but whoever did it had a reason, either because they are a pyromaniac who is just getting their jollies by setting a huge building on fire, thinking that perhaps they wouldn't hurt anyone, or maybe somebody had financial reward to gain, but we have no evidence of that.
Is there any scuttlebutt down there yet, Chris, that maybe the ultimate or the real target could have been the Continental Paper Company? Has that been discussed, or has anybody asked that question?
We asked that question earlier to some of the investigators on this scene, and because the fire actually started in the warehouse, they think it was the warehouse that was the target. It did spread quickly. Those bundles of rags are very combustible and can sometimes even explode, so it didn't take long for that fire to get over to the Continental Warehouse. But the Continental Warehouse has already found another location to operate temporarily. Their business is going fine. No indication that anyone would want to take them on as a target.
Rode the whirlwind of fire and smoke from a derelict building, and in the bowels of the ungodly inferno claimed 3 good men, despite the frantic efforts of the living to somehow save them. Gone, Lieutenant Paul Shimmick, 46 years old, a decorated veteran, a fireman's fireman, as friends called him, the guy who was always in the thick of things. Gone, 20-year-old Larry McDonald, Jr., an on-trial firefighter, following in the family tradition in the footsteps of his father, also a Detroit fireman. Gone, Lieutenant David Lau, 58, a fire training academy instructor who had been staying on the job past his planned retirement date. At home, Lieutenant Lau's widow, Isabel, was being comforted by family and friends today, and as we talked, she spoke proudly of her man, of his pride in his profession, and of the pain in his passing.
He was always there, always the strength was there to fall back on. That's gone. You can't replace that. But the memories are there to sustain you through all of this.
The wife of a firefighter lives with us.
I guess so. You're gonna have to. You have no choice. But it's a senseless death to me, an abandoned building. 20-year-old loses his life. For what? Walls? Structures? And Coleman Young doesn't want to give him a 13% raise. It's got a lot to be said right there. But You can't bring them back. And that's the sad part.
Details are not yet final, but on Monday, a massive memorial service is planned. The three men will be borne through the city streets in flag-draped coffins aboard fire trucks. It is here at Elmwood Cemetery each year that firefighters gather at this memorial to remember those who gave their lives in the line of duty. A bell is sounded, and this year, that bell will toll 3 additional times. From Detroit, Eric Smith, Channel 7 Action News, reporting.
As we reported, yesterday's fire was the worst disaster for the Detroit Fire Department in 70 years. The tragedy reminds us all of the many risks taken by firefighters, which we all too often, I think, take for granted. A firefighter's job can change from boredom to sudden danger at any given moment. And as we saw with yesterday's tragic event, death and injury are often a big reality on the job. Joining us right now live in the studio is Lieutenant George Nekurik, who is president of the Detroit Firefighters Association. Good evening, Lieutenant, and thanks very much for joining us on 5 o'clock Focus on what I'm sure has been a difficult time and difficult day for you. There's been a big question about whether or not procedures were followed correctly last night. We're dealing with an empty warehouse there last night. Those firemen had to go into that warehouse to stop that fire, or did go in there, and resulting in at least one man at that point being killed. Was that the proper procedure as you see it?
Yes, it is the proper procedure. Normally what we try and do is to get in the building and put out the fire as quick as possible. And by putting the fire out as quick as possible, you protect surrounding exposures. As you know, yesterday what happened is that they were attempting to protect the Continental paper.
Isn't there at a time like that thinking, well, maybe we're just going to have to let this go for a loss since the heat was so intense in that area? Is it worth it, you know, that most of the buildings there were abandoned?
Well, if you let the fire continue on, then you know you're going to lose the businesses and possibly even some of the residents close by. We attempt, once arrival at the fire, you try and size up the situation, and if conditions warrant, you go inside and try and put out the fire. You have to get to the seat of the fire in order to put it out. And by getting to the seat of the fire, you do have to enter the structure itself.
Obviously, a major chore for the fire department in a situation like that is to try to protect property. That's what they were doing when they went into the Continental building adjacent to the original fire scene. Was that procedure correct? Should they have been where they were when, of course, that roof came down on 2 firemen who were on the 3rd floor?
Yes, that's proper procedure, that you go into the second structure and try and protect it. I believe in this particular case is that the fire did spread from the first building and went into the Continental Paper Company, and it was proper procedure to go in and try and protect that building.
Hindsight is always easier, and of course we want to protect our people in the future. What changes would you like to see if you could second guess and make changes in the way things were handled yesterday? What would you say?
Well, the only thing I can really say is I wish the building was torn down before the fire ever started. Other than that, from the reports I get, procedure that was handled yesterday was correct.
Do you think many of these abandoned buildings around Detroit should come down for our own safety?
Yes, I do believe they should come down.
Okay.
All right, you seem to be resigned, Lieutenant, to the fact that those deaths could not have been prevented yesterday except by getting rid of the building beforehand.
Well, I feel if the building wasn't there, the deaths could have been prevented. That's the start. You have to get rid of some of those dangerous buildings within the city.
All right.
Okay, Lieutenant George Nekurik of the Detroit Firefighters Association, thanks very much for being our guest on 5 o'clock Focus. Margie.
There's much more to come in the second half of News.
If it's safe enough to attack the fire, then he goes and attacks it at his discretion.
Fire officials also tell News 4 the blaze was deliberately set. 2 suspects are in custody, but no charges have been filed. A reward of $2,000 is being offered for any information leading to the arrest and conviction of those who started that blaze. People all over the Detroit area are mourning the deaths of 3 men who lost their lives fighting that blaze. 31-year veteran Lieutenant David Lau died after being trapped inside the burning building. Lieutenant Paul Shimmick, a 26-year veteran, was blown out of a 3rd-story window by an explosion and fell to his death. Larry McDonald Jr. was also trapped in the building. He was a rookie who had only been on the job for 4 months.
There is still considerable activity at this hour at the scene of that gigantic warehouse fire near downtown Detroit that started yesterday afternoon. That fire killed 3 firefighters and injured 10 others. The fire that began in an abandoned warehouse and then spread to a paper warehouse next door finally burned itself out overnight and this morning. Mayor Coleman Young has ordered flags at city buildings at half-staff while the city mourns the death of those firemen. Jennifer?
News 4's Ned McGrath was at the fire scene all day yesterday and throughout today. He is live at the site with the latest developments. And Ned, what has been going on today?
Well, Jennifer, the firefighters are finally able to catch their breath if they can do it with all the dust that is being kicked up here. There is still a lot of activity going on here. Utility crews are out here. They're putting in electrical and phone cables, everything that was disrupted last night. And the demolition crews are on the scene now. They're knocking down the walls. Jennifer, I look at that and it is almost kind of eerie in a way. What remains almost looks like a gravestone, maybe a makeshift memorial to the victims of this fire. There's just no escaping that mood, that feeling here today. The firefighters who are here say they have dedicated their efforts to those who have died. At noon, as they were still pouring water on the warehouses, the word went up and down the line, stay back.
Yeah, we have a dangerous situation right now with all the walls are ready to collapse. And definitely we don't see too many firemen near the fire, do you? They're all back or up on aerials, away from the building if it should happen to fall, and nobody get injured.
You don't want anybody in there close, right?
No.
Demolition equipment was here by 3 and made quick work of the outside walls. By 4, arson investigators began posting signs. A $2,000 reward for information. Simply put, someone out there knows. John, this is not routine, putting up posters for $2,000 rewards, is it?
It's not out of the ordinary, really. I don't necessarily put up reward posters on all fire systems, but we have done it before, and it has been very effective for us. All right. And like I said, this is not our reward program. This is a program set up by the insurance companies.
Jennifer and Jack, the arson detectives told me that they think that somebody in this neighborhood knows something that happened here, and they want information from those people. As we have been reporting last night and today, there are 2 people that are being held for questioning, but no charges have been filed. And so it appears, at least at this time, that they're not able to file those charges until they get a little bit more information. They admitted up front they need help, and so that's why they are combing the neighborhood right now. They're knocking on doors. They're looking for help. They're putting those posters up in hopes that they can get some clues.
Ned, there's been a lot of second-guessing going on today about the firemen being in the burning building yesterday. The department considering reviewing its policies on how it fights a fire like that at all?
Well, I haven't heard them say that they will review specifically that policy, Jennifer, but they are going to review everything that happened here. It's kind of hard to avoid asking that question when you look at what happened here. I can only repeat something that we said earlier and we heard from firefighters before, and that is that when they got to this abandoned building, they had to take the hoses up to the source of the fire. The source of the fire was up on the 4th floor. When they got up there, the flames spread very quickly. That's when the explosion happened. That's when the man was knocked out the window.
Okay, Ned, as they say, a danger they live with every time they go out. Thank you, Ned.
And it's real easy to second guess.
Yeah. Thank you, Ned.
Well, Mayor Coleman Young is leading the city in extending condolences to the families of the 3 firefighters who died in that blaze. The victims were Lieutenant David Lau, who had served for 32 years, Lieutenant Paul Shimmick, a 26-year veteran of the force, and Larry McDonald, a 2nd-generation firefighter in his 5th trial month in the department. 3 firefighters remain hospitalized, fortunately all in good condition. They are Derek Grochowski, Lieutenant Bob English, and Harvey Thiebert. All 3 are in Detroit receiving hospital. 7 other firefighters who were injured in the same blaze have been released from the hospital. Jen?
The warehouse fire that killed 3 firefighters has brought sorrow to the city and the families of the dead men. But the tragedy serves to show how firefighters and the tradition of firefighting can make a world of difference to the vitality of the city. News 4's Steve Gray is in the newsroom with the story of one of the fallen firefighters and his proud family. Steve?
Jennifer, Larry McDonald was actually 3rd-generation firefighter, and for Larry McDonald Jr., being a firefighter was much more than a job. It was a family tradition. Just 4 months on the force, the 20-year-old fireman was following in the footsteps of his father, his grandfather, and 3 uncles.
He kind of had in his mind that he wanted to be like his dad and his uncles and his grandfather.
Larry McDonald's Uncle Dale is a Detroit firefighter. Dale and his 3 brothers followed their father, John, into the department. Larry McDonald Sr. is on the far right in this 1973 photograph. Larry Jr. was a top athlete at Notre Dame High School and a good student. Still, he wanted to be a fireman. When Larry Jr. graduated from the academy 4 months ago, his Uncle Alan, a fire sergeant, says the family was proud.
A time-honored tradition. It was something that almost every boy in the family has kind of looked up to and towards. It's not an absolute. He did make the decision on his own. His dad took him down there for the application and stuff like that, but everything else was on his own.
After his graduation from Fire Academy, Larry McDonald followed in another family tradition. He was assigned here to Engine Company number 26. This is the same firehouse his father, Larry Sr., was assigned to as a rookie more than 20 years ago. Larry lived at home with his parents, and today fellow firemen came by to offer their sympathies. Firefighting has always been close to the center of family life. The McDonalds also know about the risks involved.
You deal with it every day, and you become a little cold to the dangers that are, you just don't seem to realize because you're dealing with it every day. And but the potential is always there. From the smallest car fire to an inferno like they have there, there's as much danger as on any one of these, anytime you go out.
Dropped here. The Detroit Fire Department mourns the loss of 3 firefighters as a giant arson blaze is under investigation. Good evening. At this time last night, News 4 was the first to report that Detroit Fire Department investigators believed arson was the cause of the fire that killed 3 firefighters. Tonight, that belief remains, but the case is far from solved. News 4's Nona Barbie is standing by live at the scene of that killer fire with the latest. Certainly a lot quieter tonight, Nona, than last night.
Margie, tonight this scene is an eerie reminder of the death and horror that gripped firefighters only yesterday. As crews here continue smothering what remains of the smoldering embers of last night's inferno, investigators continue their questioning of 2 men. In connection with the blaze, authorities are calling a murderous case of arson. What once had been a sprawling abandoned warehouse and a thriving business next door are only smoky piles of gigantic rubble now. A skeleton crew of 35 firefighters remain on the scene tonight, dousing the debris to keep it from reigniting.
We've got the walls that were dangerous knocked down, and we've got 3 aerial platforms operating right now to knock the fire down. But it's a long drawn affair. It'll take all night to do this.
The firefighters on duty tonight are going through the routine paces of mopping up following yesterday's catastrophe here. The loss of 3 of their colleagues weighs heavily on them, but the commander-in-chief says his men are carrying on as they always do, like professionals.
The emotion is the personal thing that they know the people you work with and so on and so forth.
Are they pretty much keeping that to themselves, their grief?
Pretty well. You know, I mean, a few comments here and there, but it's pretty well within them, you know.
As the fire scene winds down, the probe into the arson blaze is heating up. Investigators are going door to door in this West Side neighborhood trying to find possible witnesses to the fatal fire.
I think the citizens of this city are highly offended by this, and since it is an arson, we're hoping that people will, through being offended, and any information would come forward with this information.
Authorities are asking anyone with information about the fire to call the arson hotline. That's 224-2040, or the Detroit Homicide Squad at 224-4280. That's 224-4280. A $2,000 reward is being offered to the person or persons who provide information that leads to an arrest and conviction in this case. Margie?
Let me ask you something. For anyone who is watching who might have information, is kind of nervous and afraid to come forward, how do they know that information will be kept confidential?
Well, we have the pledge from authorities, the fire investigators I talked with earlier, that anyone who wants to remain anonymous will remain anonymous. The police are anxious, and as well as the fire investigators are very anxious to catch the people or the person who's responsible for this blaze, so they will respect that confidentiality.
All right, certainly so.
And taken into custody for questioning is expected to be released soon, and the other, who's being held on an outstanding warrant, probably had nothing to do with the fire. As News 4's Paul Long reports, fire officials hope that increasing the arson reward will bring them new leads.
This morning, snow covered the rubble of Thursday's tragedy. The fire that burned for 38 hours smoldered and will for days to come.
We had an aerial on a window here, and we dropped the rope out of another window here.
Fire officials were again on the scene, reconstructing events, investigating how 3 men were killed, 10 injured, and the Continental Paper and Supply Company destroyed.
Every company in the area has always looked at this area, this building, and said one of these days we're going to get one there. They've pre-planned them, what we're going to do. Didn't look like much on arrival.
Arson, Lieutenant Peck. The arson squad expects their investigation to be a long one, but leads are coming in, 4 good ones so far, and more expected, as the reward for information has now risen to $4,000 and may go even higher.
The reward can be a real key to our investigation, yes, because what it does is it attracts people attention, people that have some information, even people that have information about that building before the fire.
There had been complaints about the warehouse from neighbors and Continental Paper. Firefighters made numerous trips there to put out small fires. The city had slated it for demolition. Now questions and concerns are being raised again over the hundreds of other abandoned buildings in the city.
We have doubled our schedule for demolition. Right now, we have all the contractors available in Detroit and in this area working on demolition. So it was definitely not a case of neglect. We're going as fast as we possibly can. We spend as much money as we possibly can.
What's left now is for the debris to be cleared sometime later this week once it all cools down, the investigation to continue, and for the fire department to learn from this, as it does from any fire. However, as one fireman told me this morning, no matter how good the training, no matter how much you learn and how careful you are, eventually something like this is going to happen, and it will probably happen again. Paul Long, News 4, Detroit.
Detroit fire officials are asking anyone with information about the killer arson fire to call them. There are 2 hotlines, 1-800-44-ARSON.
Employees of the Continental Paper and Supply Company, which was also destroyed by last week's fire, met to learn what the future will hold for them. Owners of the business have told Action News they will bounce back from the tragedy, but it could be July before they're able to move into a new building. Before today's meeting with his employees, Mike Pisa told Action News that he hopes the police have their man and that justice is served.
Well, I hope he's the right guy. I don't understand why anyone would want to start that fire. And if he's the right guy, he should be prosecuted to the hilt. For the firemen, for the loss of people's lives. I mean, it's, you know, we lost a building, and I'm able to rebuild that. And I watched this Mrs. Lau, and she's probably stronger than I am. And
widow of one of the firemen.
Yeah, and that's pathetic. You know, I can always buy some more toilet paper.
None of Continental's 85 employees are expected to be put out of work because of the fire. In fact, the firm is hoping to resume shipments.
So don't back it in. Hey, White, do you turn on light? Try to find out. Turn my light, pull lock or not.
expect Michael over here to speak or not?
He was here.
He was just headed back.
He didn't make the phone.
Okay, push the button.
Oh, no. Do you have it?
Oh, Joel.
Well, Joe should be here by 9:30.
I'll put Tony on camera. That's got to be worth something.
That's not worth anything, guys. Believe me. Go ahead.
I'm not from the newspaper. Jeez.
I have some calendars back. I'll have to ask him about the delivery. I mean, pick up. They can pick it up 2 times 3 times. I'm just going to take my phone.
There's a famous movie star, Gina.
Can I take my hat off and get a reflection? I was bored. I didn't know what to expect.
Oh, there's Brown.
films. Wasn't there another great Ford in films?
Francis Ford.
When I come back, I'll bring the book I'm bringing. Okay. And maybe you can tell me. I had it. Yes. You're looking at the vehicle. All that's up is not right.
I think we saved it some. Okay, buddy. Receivables.
We save that. Payables.
Sam. Sam.
Material processing.
How was that a wedding? You wanted to put roof, the drape, and brought the drape back down.
We need the towel over here.
Mr. Sibley.
What did you do? Did you take the plastic off? Did you take the metal off?
Dinner. Who wants a glass? Yes. Ford first, and I'll tell you.
Toast.
Don't drink that.
Go that way, Ron.
Cheerio, cheerio.
Can't drink that, can't?
Cheers. Enjoy that. You want that? You get one? No drink. Oh, Bob.
Say when?
We only got 5 more minutes, so you did it. We thank you. You're amazing. Very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So everybody's got some?
Cheers.
Does I need any?
Yeah, I'll take it home.
Bravo.
Only in Dearborn.
They said it couldn't be done.
Brand new company.
And then
Same old employees, but a brand new company.
Where's Dave? Anybody seen Dave?
Dominic is standing on.
You gonna wait till tomorrow afternoon and take some more? Is there enough film?
Oh, yeah.
Who's calling me? Who's calling? What? Who's calling?
a bomb-buster sign in there, Dennis? I think that's what you want.
Carol, all the Websters up in that one row. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Next is mobile.
Isn't it amazing? Shut it off and come on.